Hey Collective, it's Al, and today's video is going to be accompanying another piece I'm doing for LinkedIn that actually centers around what kind of can happen to people who study things or are part of academia, spirituality, or any type of the scientific research fields that specifically deal with accrued knowledge over time and what can happen when it actually meets an aha moment or an epiphany and the birth of something new that comes from such action. And essentially what had happened is that I was working on a special project that I might be putting into development that I'm going to keep on the side for the moment, but that I was looking back through the work I had put out on LinkedIn and realized that I had amassed quite a bit of information, but that seemed to be in different sectors of interest. And one of the things that provided for me in a retrospective perspective was the ability to then look back on it from a new lens, trying to understand what the correlation was between each of the pieces. And one of the things that was revealed to me is that they actually did fit together. And the quest that I had been on an eternal nature might actually have some value to the collective as a whole, which is what this particular video is going to be discussing. So as many of you know who have been following any of my work for any period of time, I've been pretty much under like a higher calling to kind of find how spirituality bridge each other, to bridge the realms of faith and science, because I feel like they echo each other in a way that's very important for the evolution of the species, where though they pretend that they're contradictory to each other, they actually are echoing and reflective of each other's information, just in a different form of vernacular. And it is in that breakdown of communication where a lot of our stagnation is coming from. So I've been doing a lot of work dealing with spirituality and different spiritual principles and content generation that's very uplifting and is on a higher vibrational level, as well as bridging the gap with a lot of things like string theory, quantum entanglement, quantum physics, a lot of things even to do with the multiverse, the holographic universe. And the correlation between the two was rather interesting to me. As I finally put everything together for what I'm going to be working on next, one of the things that I noticed is that it seems to be part of a greater puzzle, and each of them actually does serve as a piece to the puzzle. And I found that my quest, that I thought was kind of the humble ramblings of a crazy person sometimes, was actually grounded in some reality. Because what we revealed during our research and our ongoing conversation with those of you who watch my work or that read the material that I put out, you understand that there are actually a lot of things that intermingle with each other. And one of the things that we've been working on as a collective is uncovering how best to bring those worlds closer together so as to break down the barriers to keep us divided. Because a house divided shall fall, a house united shall rise. And if we are indeed on an ascension path, a return home, if you will, to a higher purpose and a higher sense of being, then the arrival of the higher consciousness is somehow changing the environment around us. And part of our task as a collective, that's fun and exciting, is to figure out how we can be of best service to that outcome or to that higher prompting, and if we are to play a part or not, and then what is our purpose, what is our mission in life, and how do we fit into the equation. But one of the things that we're missing in the division is the understanding of what can possibly be the purpose behind the overall arc of our journeys. And what it is, in my personal opinion, and something I want you to consider, is the possibility that we are indeed in the mind of the All, who is standing before a blank canvas, projecting his intention and vision into it, creating the second dimension as a flat surface, with the dimensionality of the third dimension added as it projects it out into the universe as the backdrop to the painting or to the piece that he's working or it is working on. And it then puts motion and time added to it as the evolutionary means that it takes to perfectly paint in or pixelate what it is that will make up the overall masterpiece at the end of the journey. And one of the things I found very interesting is that for the longest time, a lot of people have found that to be a rather complex idea. But what ends up happening is the idea of projection is not lost in humanity. It happens anytime that light hits either a prism or light hits a diamond. A clear image personifies a prism, or when we see the light hit certain raindrops and it personifies a projection of a rainbow that millions of people all witness as real, but it's nothing more than the illusion of color added to that intent. And one of the things that I found interesting about that is that it was like we were observing it, and in the observation it became illumined to us, in the same way that science states that electrons and atoms, when observed through the double-slit experiments, then acts in accordance to how it's supposed to be projected outwardly. And I thought that was rather interesting, because what are humans but the amalgamation of electrons and atoms in motion? And from a microcosmic to macrocosmic level, I started to see how the universe actually might be a holographic expression of the intent behind the all. And I found that to be a rather rewarding train of thought to venture along with, right? Because I started to look at it from a much higher perspective of how if the universe is indeed the backdrop by which we are the expression of as a central focal point, then each of us are indeed part of the holographic world that is then at the center, each of us being a fine-tuned speck of light or a paintbrush stroke that represent a specific quest or query that the all is trying to actualize in the overall arc of the storyline. And it reminded me, as I was looking back through my work for this other project, that I had actually spoken to that in a dream that I'd had where I was receiving a healing and I was looking up at a holographic expression of the earth, which was made up of all the composites of each of our voices that were literally brushstrokes, that literally were composite images within each stroke of our storylines that created the overall vibration and arc of the earth itself. And I started to wonder if that was the intent behind what the great boss was doing, what I call the great architect. Was he designing something sacred that he was going to then use or utilize in some way, shape, or form? Because it led to a lot of philosophical questions and a lot of mirroring between faith and science and how they echoed one another in their quest. Because in science, what we've discovered through the entanglement and through all of the different aspects, including string theory, we've realized that when atoms and so forth collide with one another, they tend to separate, right? And what are humans, but like scripture says, atoms? But the only difference is we've always looked at ourselves as ADAMS as opposed to ATOMS. And then when you suddenly look at it from the perspective of, well, what if they're parallel to each other, just from a macro to a microcosmic way, you start to then see that science does duplicate itself very clearly in the human expression, right? In the story of the beginning, we're told that the great architect created and envisioned one by the name of Adam and put all of the energy into Adam, but Adam then duplicated and had a feminine, the masculine feminine then being born, kind of like in the universe where first there was chaos and then there was light and then there was order, right? So 1, 2 made 3. Well, in the human expression, Adam and Eve, the Adam duplicates, becomes the second Adam, a feminine, then crossbreed, and a third Adam is born, adding a different aspect to the canvas, right? And so as each of us then duplicate and duplicate, we are all entangled, not just in string theory, but in the cell and the placenta, if you will, the uteri that the earth is as a composite of. We are all entangled into that mix and our atoms intermingling with each other, kind of personifying the idea behind the multiple worlds theory, where the all is manifesting through each of us, and once the atoms are expressed and observed, they duplicate, one going clockwise, one going counterclockwise, and that we experience the universe in this way even though we're not cognizant of it, and it creates multiple worlds. Well, the theory is a fascinating experience, but we overlook the most obvious expression, which is this. What if the earth serves as where those worlds actually do come together, right? Each human expression is an atom that is still part of the all, that duplicates and duplicates and duplicates and duplicates to the 7 billion tune, all adding their vibration and their experiences to the overall arc of the journey of humanity. Each of us serving a higher purpose, a higher calling, but that is kind of oblivious and lost upon us until we reach a certain level of enlightenment where we receive enough data and information to then move forward carrying a torch that then illuminates and helps light the rest of the piece. And as each of us then do that, we literally become different timelines coexisting in the same sphere of God consciousness, all intermingling, believing that we are indeed separate, never realizing that we're actually all one source of inspiration. And that is incredibly empowering to humanity. You see, we are an amalgamation of the all's creativity. And one of the things that brings to us is a sense of warmth, where we are asked to choose love and light. And we're asked to move forward in a way that helps uplift humanity to a higher state of consciousness. But what is consciousness if not intention, a universal design that is harmonized through possibly meditation, where the all is in deep meditation, thinking about what his next greatest creation is going to be to add to the collection, and we are but the aspects in motion that are bringing that vision into actualization. And if that is the case, then we are an incredibly empowered species that, if brought together, can change the universe. The universe is a constantly expanding expression of creativity. And the more energy that we bring to uplifting it and to bringing new ideas and new aspects, the more that the all gets a more defined and refined vision of what it is that he's actually after, which revealed a very sacred question to me. What if what he's painting is the resolution to the question, who am I really? And then personify that into the vision quest that we are all sharing in the earthly realm as the amalgamation of those atoms with that definable, ingrained programming to then experience and resolve the queries that answer the question as to who he or she is, so as to better then exemplify the actualized vision of that energy. That fine-tuned vibration that would raise everything and everyone all at once. And isn't that a rather fascinating philosophical question to explore? So sometimes when you look at your work, especially if you are in the field of academia, you're studying whatever thing it is, or you're on the quest of spirituality and you're working up the mountain, or you're an artiste, or you're a scientific researcher, or whoever you are, realize that sometimes you won't know how much you know until you're meant to know it. And on the moment that that becomes relevant to your storyline, something pops, light hits you quickly, and epiphany, or what Oprah Winfrey calls aha moments, occur. And it changes the course of your own destiny, because you start to act and react to things differently because your awareness has been heightened to the fact that there's an energy helping you along your path. Now, the interesting thing is perspective, and that's what I wanted to speak to you all as the collective consciousness, or as the conscious beings or leaders that exist out there, or even the intelligentsia. Our experience is based on our perspective. If we can learn to experience the universe through the eyes of the all, then we can better personify it in our own double-slit experiment. Because has anyone overlooked the fact that the all would probably have two eyes? And so his double-slit experiment, one being faith, spirit, soul, and one being science, and all of the areas that are part of that, as it looks into the shadow nature that the universe is comprised of, and asking it, what are the aspects that I choose to uplift and bring forward, and what are the parts that need to be worked out? Because if you can see the world through that lens, through the all's potentiality, then you see the world as a wondrous place. You see it as a rewarding experience where equality and justice will be for everyone, where humanity will rise into a new sense of heaven on earth. But that requires a lot of us to do a lot of soul searching, to kind of break free of the dogma and manipulation that it is to be afraid is to be the right resolution. But that's not always the case, because if the species stays afraid, then no one grows and no one prospers. We see that in manipulative tactics, like when people run for elections and things like that. The lower vibration tends to use fear to trigger people into doing things that they wouldn't normally do. And in that, it breaks from the all's vision of the future. And the reason we know that is because of how quickly the collective consciousness has ascended into the forefront of our minds. Remember, it was kind of a free-for-all before, and then suddenly 2020 happened, and then a lot of us came back way more spiritual, way more grounded, way more compassionate and empathetic for each other, and we started to break away from dogma and doctrine, but not in a way that left us just in the wilderness, but in a way that made us go on our own quests. And in those quests, a lot of us are uncovering or touching upon things that other people just maybe have not considered before. And is there anything really wrong with that? You know, your perspective is key into the experiences that we have. But in right alignment, if you find a place of peace, or you find a place of hope, and you carry that torch forward, then your experience has to respond in that way, because your vibration is too high for it to be really messed with for long periods of time otherwise. Right? If you understand and are faithful, even to science, then you understand that your life is based in science, and everything that you need to resolve the queries that you're working on will be resolved in time, in the natural evolution of things. In the same way that a spiritualist or a religious person understands that they will understand all when it's time, but that for the moment they just have to have faith, and faith and science bridge all things. It's the balance of the two slits of experience that we are trying to actualize as humans that is the quest that we as a collective are on. And how you choose to see that quest will identify and help the world around you. The higher vibration you are, and the more you believe in miracles, or the more that you believe that life is wondrous and beautiful, the more that you carry that vibration and that signature out into the world, and the more that people will respond to you. I promise. It happens to me all the time. And the less other negative aspects can come even near you. Because when you walk in light, then darkness has no choice but to dissipate in front of you. It may not always be your awareness being completely on it, but if you have faith that a higher consciousness is always with you, then you don't worry about the shadow. You just realize your presence is enough and that it will work itself out. But that takes trust, and the only way to rebuild trust is for you to find the beauty in life. If we all can see that the all is manifesting a masterpiece that we are a part of, then you experience the world in a masterful way. You see the world through the lens of something much higher, something that resonates at a much higher vibration than what we're used to. Because you're no longer stuck in dogma or fear, or you're not stuck in your insecurities. And when they happen, you still experience them, but you just look at them and go, that's my ego. And you can hit the door, buddy. I'm busy right now. I'm creating something special and sacred that I'm feeling called upon. But when you don't have that, it's really easy to get lost in the illusion of disillusionment, where you don't have faith, and you believe what the narrative tells you, which is that the world's going to shit. Well, the world that they've created has created war and famine and destroyed millions upon millions of souls, and they are afraid of accountability. And so the more people they take down, the harder it is for the rest of us to raise the vibration to a newer, higher state of being. It's a power play. But we don't worry about the power play, because we know the all will always get his or her way. So we have plain trust in the universe to do what it needs to do in order to raise us up. So the question that then leaves us with is, are we an addition to the masterpiece or a conundrum? Are we in alignment with where the all is taking us? Because if you believe that the all is flawed, then you will have a flawed experience. But if you truly have faith and love in the great architect, and you understand a universal consciousness, or even believe in the matrix, then you know it has laws and a design set in place that protects you if you're in right alignment. So then what are we afraid of? Are we afraid to explore the possibility that we are literally just a projection? That we don't technically exist? Would that be so hard for us to believe when we see things throughout our experience that are but illusions? They're not real. In fact, fear, for the most part, is not real. A lot of us will walk through life afraid, hearing whispers of some faint past experience that tells us it's going to repeat itself, when in reality, we just have to make a different choice and that never happens again. But we have to have faith that it won't. It's about mindsets. And when we align ourselves at a higher vibration, then the content and the words that we actualize and ground into the universe helps the universe expand in a way that uplifts everyone around you. And isn't that the purpose of what spirituality and science should be doing? We're trying to resolve the big quest. What are we doing here, and why? Well, if we live our life believing that it's in torment and to be imprisoned, then we have an imprisoned, tormented experience. We believe in our indoctrination to believe that we must suffer in order to please some higher order. But if that higher order ever decides along the journey that he or she has had enough of that, then who are we to stand in the way of that? And we then have to actualize and ask ourselves, who are we? Which again falls into the great quest that the all may be trying to personify in this particular canvas piece that we call humanity. A panel of atoms that exist as different worlds, different timelines, all coexisting at once. But it's still the all in every single one of them, all brought together in a cell, if you will, that we call Earth, an academy that has us entangled in a sense where we are all coexisting and mirroring aspects to each other in order to accomplish a greater vision that the all is trying to actualize. Are you part of those strokes of brilliance, or are you the shadow side, only there to teach people how to rise above it? because it's a very clear distinction for where we're going. Life is a miracle, and we are incredibly blessed to be here. However this all came to be, the question is, what do we do with such sacred knowledge now? Do we personify light into the world, and do we bring harmony and hope to each other? And if we don't, then understand that there are consequences, because the boss has obviously changed direction. There is a sense of hope growing among our people. There is a sense of desire for a better way of life. We see clearly through the narrative, and we don't buy into their experiences anymore. We don't believe the fear-mongering, and we allow those who are fear-mongered to go down that path, because it's not our karma, it's not our destiny. Each of us are facing a choice in a spiritual war, if you will, between a lower nature that wants to hold on to power because of the status quo or just because it's afraid of change. But there's a higher consciousness that is very present, that is very unitive, that brings love and light into the universe in a way that's probably never been felt before. And which of the two do you think the Matrix, the universe, God, or the great architect is going to follow? Because that is the quest that you now are a part of. So when you see that piece, when you see this video, don't get triggered by the fact that I'm saying that that's a possibility. Instead, ask yourself, well, what would be the harm in us actually coming together? And what would be the harm if more scientists stopped competing against each other, but started working towards how they actually interconnect? And are they layered? And then for spiritualists, stop trying to name the doggy, stop trying to name the puppy. It's irrelevant who or what you call it. As long as you believe in something, then it brings you the hope and the drive and the passion to keep going on your journey. At some point, when you learn enough lessons, I promise you, life stops being hard that way. You don't suffer. Instead, you just make different choices. And though you may run into roadblocks and you may experience challenges, you will always believe, once you've passed a certain threshold, that it's there only to teach you something. And you immediately convert a lesson into a blessing. It's pretty fast. But you have to be willing to engage the world in a different way. So what I'm saying to you is look back over my work. Look back over the others' work that you are interested in. Do they bring you upliftment? And if so, what are the connecting pieces? And does that make sense to you? Because if it makes sense to you, then you're part of that collective. If it doesn't make sense to you, then there's no harm, no foul. All you did was consider something you've never considered before. You can't make somebody change their mind on anything. If someone is hell-bent on believing something and not open to change, then they will have a very rocky road, but they're going to have their own path. It's not our challenge to live other expressions' lives. We're just supposed to be aware that they are but mirrors of either ourselves in the past or mirrors of ourselves in the future, or that they are meant to be somehow in our partnerships, right? Because when you bring this particular type of nuclei and this particular type of information and data forward, what ends up happening is a lot more darkness is disbanded, and it cannot stand against such unity and beauty, right? When you look at light, you look at rainbows. You see the color scheme explode, and you look at the scale and scope of the backdrop that we exist in. The universe is an incredibly gorgeous experience that is made up of so many questions. Why? Well, because we haven't figured ourselves out. If we are indeed microcosmic expressions of the universe in motion, brought together so as to create a greater vision that then expands the piece outwardly, then wouldn't it make sense that first we have to figure out our own shadow natures and how to shine light upon it so as to not be triggered by it in order to help the universe stabilize itself? Because if the mind of the all is clear on its vision, then our quest has now become, well, how do we help that vision come to life? Because we are already here and it's already happening. What role are we choosing to play in the new masterpiece unfolding? And that's what I want to leave you guys with. I hope you have an incredibly blessed day. Love you all.